because right now we're at, I think, a really important time for not only education, but EdTech in particular, as the government's expected to publish a white paper on further education in Britain. And it's vital that the digital infrastructure and environment in education is considered in that. At the moment, I think it's not enough. And we've been looking at this from the perspectives of rights, access, and opportunity. So it's from that three sort of point plan that we've looked at this afternoon. And Joe is going to cover the access area more than myself. And obviously Gillian really addressed the sort of opportunities angle. But they all tie together. And I think it's really important that we start to see further education, the aspects of digital infrastructure and what matters in further education across the whole of the education sector. A lot of the issues are similar. So I think we've seen over this summer, you know, the exams 2020, where algorithms and automated decision-making play such an important role in all of our lives now, that we live in a much more automated and digital environment. And we need to make sure that our human rights are championed within that environment. And that's really where our perspective comes from. So we'll start with just thinking a bit about the rush to remote learning, you know, in response to the pandemic, because children's rights were really ignored at speed and scale in 2020 in this rush to adopt technology. It was critical, obviously, to meet children's right to education and do that in the best way that schools could. And it was only through the enormous efforts that schools put in and teachers put in that made that happen. But we're now at the point where a lot of that technology that was offered for free at the start of the pandemic is now going to start charging. And it gives schools an opportunity to really do the due diligence and assessment of technology that they hadn't had a chance to do. We need to make sure we're building a safe and trustworthy digital environment and education that's not only fit for children's future and the long-term social and economic needs of the UK, but is obviously building part of the government's EdTech strategy. Because the government is really looking at a twofold strategy in EdTech, both of supporting admin primarily, so the EdTech strategy that came out in April 2019, and supporting teachers in sort of workload and addressing their administrative functions. And then it has a second strategy along with Bayes looking at EdTech as an export tool. But it means that we don't have a very joined up strategy at the moment. And it means that the vision for education and EdTech isn't consistent. In fact, it's often contradictory. And Gillian brought up already the funding that was offered to Google and Microsoft exclusively for schools to go to Google or Microsoft products at the start of the pandemic, but not to others. And so we start to look at, you know, the sort of where is funding going and what kind of infrastructure is it building? So funding at the moment, as Gillian mentioned, at least in England, because obviously the EdTech strategy is devolved like education is going very much on an ad hoc basis to individual companies. And children are in effect in some of the work that's going on with Nesta and DFE together are in some ways caught in sort of quite a lot of experimentation that they may not know it at the moment, because a lot of the products are sort of being trialed in schools to try and generate an evidence base that they don't currently have. But we need to look better at how we do that and also protect children's rights in doing so. If we look, for example, at the early years, so there were 6 early years apps approved this spring, and they may well have some good learning benefits that were academically assessed, but it appears that the assessment of their financial soundness, the companies behind them, or the suitability may have not been done. We're still trying to get that clarified, but it certainly wasn't done as part of the academic assessment. Because, you know, the sort of one of the most notable previous experiences that one of the company co-founders had, you know, was working with young people, but was interviewing his fellow students to make videos on YouTube. They weren't really looking at, you know, children and pedagogy and learning. So I think we really need to make a better assessment when we assess tech for what is the learning purpose behind the technology, who sits behind it, and what kind of values sit behind it. So we need government to deliver better digital infrastructure, but also oversight and regulation and training for schools and staff to be able to actually implement technology well. And we're not really looking at you know, adopting products for product's sake. And in some ways, that's what the current EdTech strategy does through demonstrator schools. We're looking at product adoption and selling more products, but we aren't really looking at a systemic way of addressing how these can address better skill gaps or be introduced in a systemic way that supports learning. And I think there was quite a lot of disappointment in the 2019 release of the EdTech strategy that it didn't focus on learning. So really, we're looking at things like accessibility, the infrastructure, internet access. While Gillian addressed some of what was done, we know that a lot of children are still missing. They're not getting the infrastructure and the broadband access that they need. We need to be looking, though, beyond that and a bigger picture vision of how we deliver education to all. And part of that includes looking at things like fairness and avoiding algorithmic discrimination in systems. Not only looking at the systemic barriers of poverty, racism, access, but also looking at how we look at the systems themselves. And if they're being trained on historic data, they'll pick up the same problems that we saw reflected in the exams 2020 fiasco, that historic data doesn't give you necessarily the best picture for how children should be assessed for the current or for future. We need to be looking at horizon scanning for emerging technologies and rights related issues. And part of that, I would include things like what sort of dependence we have on Silicon Valley based tech. If we are, for example, funding exclusively access to Google and Microsoft, what does that mean for the sovereignty of our state education system? If these companies are currently offering free products, what does it mean if they start charging in future? And what does it mean if we don't know what that will look like in the future and if it will change? We also then hand over a huge amount of power to these companies in that we hand over knowledge of how the education system works and how our children's data provides that knowledge to them without any benefit to the public interest. It's handed over to commercial companies and it sits with them indefinitely. We need to be looking at better clarity, consistency and confidence in the education system. School staff need really to get continuous professional development. Not only do we not have any basic data or protection or privacy or actually just functional digital literacy in basic teacher training today, but we don't offer it to teachers throughout their careers. And these sort of 5 areas looking at accessibility and infrastructure and internet access, designing for fairness in systems, horizon scanning for emerging technologies and rights issues, building the clarity, confidence and consistency in the education sector is something we want to see, and we'd like to see championed by a digital champion for the education sector. The Department for Education and Department for International Trade new education strategy has set out the government's ambition to appoint an international education champion to spearhead overseas activity. Where's that champion for the UK and our children here at home? So we'd like to see these sort of areas in policy addressed, and also be looking at legislation, because we really need to be able to protect children's access rights, not only for mainstream, but for children that are seeking, that even have difficulty accessing school places at all. So some of you may have seen the Panorama program last night with Children with SEND. Those children and families may experience the kind of exclusion every day from education that others have only experienced through the pandemic. So we need to look at how we address those access issues for every child. We need to look at how we address the system that is built at the moment to deliver 1/3 of children when they leave school as with an exam results that says they failed. The system by design through comparable outcomes does not enable the system to look any different. The outcomes for children will always be the same, no matter how smart our children become in future. 1/3 will always fail if we keep the current exam system structure and accountability system, comparable outcome system as it is today. So we need to establish a sort of whole government approach for a framework of governance, of infrastructure, of oversight that champions the best of what we've got today for digital and really looks to a better future for both our own children and how we integrate that as part of an EdTech strategy for export.